Don't get fined. UK Roundabout rules. 2026. Every driver needs to know you could be breaking the law on a roundabout right now and not even know it. That little circle of tarmac you drive through every single day, the one you've been navigating since you passed your test, has rules attached to it that changed. Rules that carry fines up to £5,000, points that can wipe out your license, and a brand new sentencing guideline that means even a tiny lapse, like forgetting to indicate, could now get you banned from driving. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you will know exactly what changed, why most drivers are still getting it wrong, and how to make sure you're never the one paying for it. Let's start with the big picture, because this is the part almost nobody talks about. The Highway Code didn't just tweak a rule here or there, it rebuilt the entire foundation of how roundabouts work around something called the hierarchy of road users. This is Rule H1, and it flips the old mentality on its head. Under this hierarchy, the people who can cause the most harm in a collision carry the greatest responsibility to prevent that harm. So at the top of that list sit drivers of large vehicles, lorries, buses, coaches. Below them, car and van drivers. Below them, motorcyclists. And right at the bottom, the most protected, are cyclists, horse riders, and pedestrians. Why does this matter on a roundabout specifically? Because roundabouts are exactly where cars, bikes, and pedestrians are most likely to collide, and the new code makes it explicit that the burden of avoiding that collision falls on you, the driver, not on the cyclist trying to get around the bend. This isn't a suggestion. It's written directly into Rule H3, and it says drivers must give priority to cyclists already on the roundabout, and must not cut across them when turning left or taking an exit. Read that again. Must not cut across them. Not should avoid, must not. That word matters enormously in legal terms because rules written with must are the ones that can result in a criminal offense, not just a piece of advice you can shrug off. Picture the scenario. You're approaching a roundabout, there's a cyclist already circulating in the left-hand lane, and your exit happens to be the next one along. The old instinct, the one most of us were taught 15 or 20 years ago, is to nip across in front of them because you're faster and you'll clear the gap before they get there. Under the current code, that exact move is what gets people fined. The cyclist is allowed to stay in that left lane even if they're continuing around the roundabout rather than exiting immediately, and they're expected to signal right to show they're not leaving yet. Your job is to read that signal, hold back, and let them complete their path before you commit to your turn. Give them room. Don't overtake them within their own lane, and absolutely do not assume they'll get out of your way just because you're in a car and they're not. Now let's talk about basic roundabout mechanics, because even without the cyclist rules, a huge number of drivers are still getting the fundamentals wrong, and this is where most fixed penalty notices actually come from. Rule 185 lays out the core approach. As you come up to any roundabout, you are expected to read every piece of information available before you arrive. That means signs, that means lane markings painted on the road, that means traffic lights if they're present. You decide which exit you need as early as possible, and you choose your lane based on that decision well before you reach the giveaway line, not at the last second when you suddenly realize you're in the wrong lane and need to swerve across two lanes of moving traffic. Here's the simple version that driving instructors still teach because it still works. If you're taking the first exit, broadly anything up to 12 o'clock on an imaginary clock face, you approach in the left lane, you signal left on approach, and you stay left all the way around. If you're going straight across, broadly the 12 o'clock exit, you can usually stay in the left lane unless signs tell you otherwise, and you signal left only after you've passed the exit before the one you want. If you're turning right, anything past 12 o'clock, or doing a full circle back the way you came, you approach in the right-hand lane, signal right, hold that lane all the way around, and only signal left once you've passed the exit immediately before yours. The single most common mistake on multi-lane roundabouts is changing lanes mid-roundabout without signaling, often because the driver picked the wrong lane on approach and panics. This is precisely the kind of moment the new sentencing guidelines, which came into force in the middle of 2025, were built to catch. Before that change, a small error like this might have gone completely unnoticed, or resulted in nothing more than informal advice from a passing officer. Now, magistrates have far more discretion to hand out short disqualifications for exactly these mid-range mistakes, even when nobody was hurt and no collision happened. A momentary lapse in concentration, glancing at your sat-nav, failing to indicate at the right moment, can now be treated seriously enough to put your license at risk, not just your wallet. Speaking of your wallet, let's get concrete about what this can actually cost you. Failing to give way properly at a roundabout typically falls under careless driving, and the standard fixed penalty notice for that is £100 along with 3 penalty points on your license. That sounds manageable until you realize what happens if you don't accept the fixed penalty, or if the case is serious enough to go to court instead. At that point, you're looking at a maximum fine of £5,000 up to 9 penalty points, and a fine that under the new guidelines can be calculated as a percentage of your actual income, in some cases up to 250% of a week's wages. For newly qualified drivers, the danger is even sharper. If you're within your first 2 years of passing your test and you rack up 6 points or more, that's an automatic license revocation, and you'll be sent right back to square one, resitting both your theory and practical tests. Let's move on to a few specific roundabout types that trip people up constantly, because the standard rules don't always apply cleanly. Mini roundabouts, the small ones marked with a flat painted circle rather than a raised island, work on exactly the same priority principle. Give way to traffic approaching from your right, unless signs say otherwise. But there's a specific legal requirement here that a lot of drivers ignore. You must drive around the central markings, not straight over them, unless your vehicle is physically too large to make the turn without doing so. That central circle isn't decoration. Driving straight across it because it's quicker is technically a breach of the rule, and it's also exactly the kind of move that confuses other drivers and increases the risk of a side collision. Double mini roundabouts, the ones you find at slightly bigger junctions where 2 of these mini circles sit right next to each other, need to be treated as 2 completely separate roundabouts. Give way at each one individually. Don't assume that because you had priority at the first one, you automatically carry that same priority into the second. A lot of confusion and a lot of near misses happen because drivers treat double mini roundabouts as one continuous junction when legally and practically they are not. Then there are spiral roundabouts, usually found at larger junctions and motorway interchanges, where the lanes are separated by raised curbing rather than just painted lines. These actually make life easier once you understand them, because the lane you enter in is the lane that will guide you all the way to your exit. The road literally spirals outward and does the work for you. The mistake here isn't usually about priority, it's about people trying to force a lane change they don't need, because they're not used to trusting the road layout to deliver them to the right exit automatically. There's one more change worth knowing, and it goes beyond just roundabouts, but applies directly to how you behave on and around them. The highway code now specifies that you should leave at least 1.5 meters of space when overtaking a cyclist at speeds up to 30 miles an hour, and more space again at higher speeds. On the approach to a roundabout, where cyclists are often moving through that left-hand lane at a slower pace than surrounding traffic, this distance rule applies just as much as it does on the open road. Squeezing past a cyclist to get into position before the roundabout isn't just inconsiderate, it can now form part of the evidence used against you if anything goes wrong. So here's the real takeaway from everything we've covered. The roundabout itself hasn't changed shape. The white lines are roughly where they've always been. What's changed is the legal weight behind every small decision you make in those few seconds before and during your approach. Who has priority? How much space you give a cyclist? Whether you signal at exactly the right moment? Whether you commit to a lane change you shouldn't be making? Every one of those tiny choices now sits under a stricter set of guidelines than it did even just a couple of years ago, and the gap between a clean pass through a roundabout and a fixed penalty notice landing on your doormat is smaller than most drivers realize. The good news is that none of this requires you to relearn how to drive. It requires you to slow down for those last few seconds before you commit. Read the lane markings properly, hold back for cyclists instead of racing them, and signal with intention rather than habit. Do that consistently, and you will never be the driver in this story who got caught out by a rule they didn't know existed. If this video helped clear up something you've been doing wrong without realizing it, do me a favor and hit subscribe on my channel right now, because there's a lot more like this coming. Drop a comment and tell me which roundabout rule surprised you the most. I read every single one. And if you know someone who could use a refresher before their next drive, send this their way. Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel so you don't miss the next one, and I'll see you in the next video.